This happened to me in 2008. This was a huge thing to my friends and family, and I didn't really talk about it back then as it scared the fuck out of me. But it was a while ago, and is a really well-known creepy story among myself and family and friends. But I think I may as well share it, as it is admittingly terrifying. I was living with my parents and sister in Brisbane, Australia at the time, 2008, which means I was 19. I remember my dad had just got Foxtel, cable TV in Australia, but only the TV in the lounge room could use the cable box, and I really wanted to somehow get cable in my room without paying $99 or whatever it was for a new box. So Dad one day went out and bought an AV transmitter/receiver. It was basically a two-piece bit of hardware where you would plug in this tiny box into the cable TV in the lounge room, and it would transmit a video signal to the receiver, connected to the TV in my room. So one Saturday, I decided to connect it. My younger sister, 16 at the time, was the only other person home at the time, upstairs in her room. My room was downstairs. I opened the box and connected it up. At first I was going back and forth, trying to get the cables right, trying to get the channel right, etc. But no luck. Until I finally got something. I remember just sitting there and something started fuzzing in. This is where things start to feel like a horror movie. I remember thinking, oh, here we go, and waiting to see the picture come in clearly. As it started fuzzing in, I remembered that this whole time the cable set-top box wasn't even on, and that's why it wasn't working this whole time. But then why was I getting a signal? It seemed to all hit me at once. As I realized the box was off, the picture fuzzed in, and I saw a bed. I freaked the fuck out, as at first I thought it was my bed. I had recently seen Saw 2, and remembered that scene where she turns on the TV and it's a camera filming her in her apartment. That was the first thing I thought of. I sprinted upstairs to my sister, absolutely terrified. I told her to come downstairs and take a look. She came down and we both realized it wasn't my bed. We didn't know whose bed it was, or how I was getting the signal. Obviously it was the AV receiver picking up a camera signal, but we were just so confused as to who/what it was for. Eventually my parents came home and we concluded it must be the neighbor, or someone living close by, for us to be receiving the signal. We waited until around 6 p.m., and then someone came into the room. My dad recognized it as one of our neighbors. We didn't know what the camera was for, but we assumed it had something to do with fidelity. Either his wife or he had set it up to watch the other one and see if they were cheating. Either this, or to tape themselves having sex. We entertained the idea that he was a murderer and would film murdering people in his room, but just to freak each other out. We'd always make jokes about how one night we'll turn it on and it'll just be his face with clown makeup on staring at the camera waving, and then him walking out of the bedroom with a knife. This never happened. But what did happen was still super creepy. We connected to the signal for over a week, but after a few days the novelty kind of wore off. We felt a bit weird watching it, and just resigned to the explanation that it was to catch his wife cheating. Until one day we turned it on, and realized what we had discovered. Our neighbors were having a bunch of renovations done to their house. During weekdays they'd be out, and there would be workers at the place pretty much all day. It had been like this for over a month. We started watching the feed and saw a man walking into their room. It was the plumber who had been there regularly for the renovations. We didn't think anything of it, until he started opening drawers. I called out to my mom, only person home at the time, and we started watching it. He started getting the wife's underpants and sniffing them, doing all that creepy shit. At first we were like, oh my god, how embarrassing. He's being filmed. Will the neighbors see this somehow? But then what happened next was truly terrifying. He slowly walked over to the camera and looked right down the lens. We were convinced that he knew we were watching. Mom immediately called Dad. I kept watching. He started fiddling with it and then put it back down. I told Mom that I don't think he knew we were watching, but he's definitely the guy that put the camera there. Dad came home, and by this time the plumber had left. Much to Mom's pleading, Dad went over to the neighbors to tell them what we saw. Mom wanted to completely stay out of it and was terrified, understandably. When we told the neighbors, they had no idea what we were talking about. They allowed Dad to go to their room, and what he found that was holding the camera was an installed device in the wall that was designed to monitor water usage, which was completely normal at the time, as Brisbane had been hit with a drought recently and there was a lot of water restrictions. Still is now, I think. The plumber had installed this into the wall, but had fitted a camera behind it in the wall to watch the bed. Immediately, they called the police, who came over and conducted an investigation. For the next week or so, we didn't hear much about it. I spent most of the time telling my friends, showing them pictures, but truthfully, my whole family was scared every night. It was just very creepy thinking that that kind of stuff could be hidden in our house. Chances are there weren't, but it was still really scary. After a couple of weeks, my mom was speaking to the wife next door and asked what had happened with it all. The wife said the police found out he would at night come to our street and sit in his car, which had really tinted windows, and watch them on his laptop. When Mom told me this, I got the biggest shivers. The reason was, besides the obvious of a creepy dude sitting in his car watching people through a hidden camera, was because on multiple nights when I had driven home late from my girlfriend's or walked home drunk after a night out, I remember seeing a station wagon always about 30 meters down the street from our house. It was never there during the day, always at night. I'd always walk past it and look at my reflection in the windows, assuming no one was inside. I was always so confused by whose car it was, but literally never thought anything of it. It still scares me so much that it was just this creepy fucking plumber sitting back there on a laptop watching a hidden camera stream of my neighbors. Anyway, that's my story. It's all true and still creeps the hell out of me to this day, but my friends and I have a good laugh about it. This began maybe 2 months ago. At an aunt's party, my sister comes up to me and says that she thinks someone has been coming into her house in the middle of the night. My sister has always been easily scared, so at first I was skeptical. I asked her how she knew someone had been in her house, whether she had actually seen anyone. She told me she hadn't seen anyone, but she says that she knows for a fact someone was in her house. She then went on to explain she has a skybox downstairs that streams to her bedroom television. The first time it happened, she said she heard the TV was being used, so she turned on her TV and someone was flicking through the channels. I still didn't really buy what she was saying, but she did seem genuinely afraid. She claimed it had been going on for 3 months on and off. To put her mind at ease, I told her I'd stay at her place for a few nights and wait to see if any guy comes. I took my younger brother along just to be safe. In all, we stayed at her place for 4 nights. In those 4 nights, nothing unusual happened. Me and my brother were convinced she was going crazy. Me and my brother decided we had stayed long enough and told her that we had to go home. She got extremely upset about this. I reassured her and told her to call the police the next time it happened. She had called the police once before about the guy, and they turned up to find no one in the house. I said she could call me anytime she wanted, and left for work. 2 days later, she calls at 11:30 p.m. and claimed he was downstairs in her house right now. I asked her how she knew, and she said he's walking around the house. She was whispering and crying. I knew she wasn't making this up. I could tell from her voice. I called my brother and told him to meet me at her house. I was on the phone with her the entire drive over to her place. I live 10 minutes away. When I got there, my brother was parked outside. We both went to the back of the house. I was still on the phone with my sister. The first floor of the house was lit solely by the TV in the living room. As we approached the patio door, we saw that a man was sitting on the couch facing us. We were frozen solid, and my sister noticed that we went quiet and started asking what was wrong and if we could see him. I told her to stay quiet and that we had it in hand. I then hung up and called the police to explain the situation. The guy hadn't moved from the couch at all. The TV turned off while we were waiting for the cops. Me and my brother majorly freaked out when it happened. We couldn't see anything downstairs. Then the hallway light turned on, meaning someone was on the stairs. We opened the patio door and ran up the stairs and caught the guy with his ear to her door. We kicked the shit out of him and got my sister out of the house. He had a knife in his coat pocket. The cops came maybe 10 minutes later. He could have killed her if he wanted to, which is fucking outrageous. It turns out the guy was one of my mom's old boyfriends who had lived with us for a while in the 90s. He had always been fond of my sister, but we had never suspected it to be him. He hadn't contacted any of us for nearly a decade. My sister has moved back in with my mom and is undergoing therapy to get over what had happened. Our stepdad, as he liked to call himself, was given 3 years in prison. We are doing our best to cut all ties with the man. I'm a nurse and I live in a small city. I was driving home from work at 2 a.m. The roads were totally deserted and it was a freezing night. I didn't live far from work, maybe a couple of miles. I'm driving down a residential street around the corner from my house and I see a man laying face down in the street. Now remember, I'm a nurse. My first thought was, great, gotta help this guy out. I was coming off a long shift and falls happen all the time. As I slowed down the car, I suddenly realized what an idiot move that was. I'm a 100-pound woman and I don't carry any weapons. I thought I should do something to help the guy, so I called 911 as I drove past him and slowed to a stop at the end of the block. While I was stopped at the light, I explained to the dispatcher that there was a man in the road who might need assistance. All of a sudden, I hear a loud banging from the driver's side window. I screamed and looked over. A man was pounding on my window and jiggling the handle of my car. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that there was no man laying in the street. Still on the phone with 911, I screamed, "I'm so scared," to the dispatcher and floored it through the red light. I quickly told him what had happened, and even though I was right by my house, he told me to keep driving. After a few minutes, I had calmed down and he told me to loop back around. I pulled over down the road from my house and stayed in the car. I didn't see the man anywhere, so I got off the phone with the dispatcher who had told me he was sending a police car to cruise the area. As I gather up my things, I do a final scan of the area, and I see the man. He is walking with 2 other men. I hunched way down in my car until they were far down the road, then bolted into my house. I don't know if he had ill intent, but it freaks me the hell out that he wasn't alone. Always lock your doors, and carry mace. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And if you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. And if you would like to help support the channel, as well as get early access to my content and a few other perks, make sure you go check out my Patreon page. So I hope everybody enjoyed these creepy stories. And I don't know about you, but I find that first story extremely creepy. Imagine just tuning your TV into someone's bedroom, only to find out it's a hidden camera they don't even know is there. Now imagine that's your house with a camera. Someone's probably watching you right now, and you don't even know. Next thing you know, you end up on Pornhub. Hey, maybe I'll hit him up and try to get him to actually put my account on there so I can make a little bit of extra money since YouTube's having its issues. Know what I'm saying? So everybody sleep tight tonight, and know that someone's out there watching you right now through a camera, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's probably in your light fixture. That's where I'd put a camera. Take care, everybody. And this Saturday, the 7th, I will be doing a live stream at about 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Make sure you have notifications on if you want to be notified when I go live. Bye.